Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeaux. We are the founders of JRNI Coaching.
We're super passionate about all things coaching and want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training over 1,000 life coaches.
Dive deep into a more meaningful career, find freedom, and make an impact on the world around you.
Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the biggest myths about coaching. Noelle, good morning.
Good morning.
This is an important episode because I'm really passionate about squashing myths because it prevents people from pursuing helping other people, these myths.
I agree. And I have to say that I'm really heartened because as we have both progressed through this field over the last decades, I think the myths are beginning to shrink, which is awesome.
And I think they come from because coaching is such a new a career and it's growing so fast that I think the myths come from what people thought coaching was when it first started, and so people are just holding on to that and not exploring, learning, investigating the evolution of coaching.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So, coaching has only been an actual discipline for 35 years.
Yeah, which sounds like a long time, but if you look at, like say a firefighter or a teacher, it's just such a small period of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's think about it historically, even comparing therapy, right? So, Freud was knocking around doing his thing pre-World War II. And that's when, therapy was being taught in people's living rooms before it moved into academia. And so, if we're looking at coaching kind of along the same lines, we're going to see different branches, just like the medical model. It's going to be expanding. Regulation is forthcoming, which I think is a wonderful thing for the field. And so, a lot of the old conceptions are dying, and the new ideas about what coaching is, who it's for, why it's effective, are really starting to spring up. So let's get into it.
Here's a quick perspective on coaching, how young it is. I am older than coaching.
Me too.
Right. It's either coaching is really young or we're really old, and I choose to believe the first.
I think we're pretty young, John.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty young. So, all right. So you're out there in the world, you're thinking about becoming a coach. You look around, and one of the biggest myths that I hear all the time is that the field of coaching is totally saturated.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is partly due to social media. I think it's what we're seeing specifically because of what we're following. I mean, if you're interested in being a coach, you're interested in wellness. And so if you're only following coaches and wellness people and companies and all that, you're going to feel like there's just too much of this. Everyone's doing it.
Oh, yeah. And also targeted ads.
Right. Yeah, of course. Compounds everything.
Exactly. And so it might appear every time you hop on your phone that you are seeing coaching. And also, if it's something that you're actively thinking about, you're priming your brain to focus on it. And so you're going to
Right.
be more observant of all things coaching. And it might feel that the field is saturated. For me, one of the number one indicators that the field is not saturated are studies that have come out recently on client perspectives. We hear a lot about coach perspectives. How do I do this? How do I build a practice? But what we're not really honing in on as a discipline is what clients think and feel. And what's going on right now at this exact moment in time, coming out of a pandemic and 2020 and everything that was, is that a minority of people have actually experienced coaching, but there is a growing majority of people who plan to engage in coaching.
Mm. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because the stigma of therapy and coaching feels more attractive? Is it because coaching is more commercialized?
I believe that the public's consciousness is really shifting, and the idea of having a coach, hiring a coach, having a life coach, working with a coach has entered the number one, the public vernacular. So it's something that is commonly talked about. I think a compounding aspect of this phenomenon is that coming out of the pandemic, more people are turning inward and asking the question of what is life? What makes life meaningful? What do I want to get out of life? What do I want to get out of my future? And coaching is literally the discipline that helps folks answer that question and move towards their best self.
Yeah, and I also want to say real quick, I think, and this is just from my own personal experience and story, the temperature is changing. I think that more people, I mean, I think that people are more interested in who you are than what you know, and I think it gives, with coaching, there's more freedom in being who you are, as opposed to, say, in the clinical world where there's a lot of shoulds with that.
Oh, yeah, and you can also give it, the cocktail party test. When you go to a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you do?" And you say, "Oh, I'm a coach." "Oh, okay, cool." You
Right,
know,
right,
and that what used to happen was I'd kinda get side eye or somebody would say, "Okay, well, tell me what I should do with my life." And I'm like, "Oh, man, I don't have magic
right,
beans. Here we
right,
go."
right. Yeah.
So, we're seeing the shift take place in real time, which is wonderful for the field and exciting for everyone.
Yep. Here is misconception slash myth number three, and that is something that anyone can do without training because the industry isn't regulated. So it's this idea that you can be a coach just because you want to.
Yeah, and that is technically true with a huge but, and it's not just like a but with a comma. This is a big but that has, like, flashlights coming out of it and tap dancing with jazz hands, because becoming a successful coach requires hard work, serious study, and a business mindset.
Yeah, and I just think with this, it's going to play itself out. So if you want to be a coach and you just make the announcement without any training, I just think it's not going to work because you're not going to have the confidence, you're not going to have the skills, you're not going to have the tools to actually help people, and so I think it will be short lived. I mean, you could only you could only go with your own knowledge or what you think a coach looks like or charisma or whatever for so long, and then the bottom drops out.
You're so right. And, when we peel the veil back even further, what we're talking about when we're talking about training, really specifically, is the theoretical roots of coaching that pull from sports psychology, goal setting theory, all sorts of different human development models, which are genuinely fascinating, positive psychology, mindfulness, and neuroscience. And so, if you're listening and saying, wow, I don't know anything about those topics, you might want to reconsider calling yourself a coach.
Yeah, and I want to say that reach alone, meaning how many followers you have on social media, um, that doesn't make you a coach. Just because you have a million followers, it doesn't mean that you are a coach now.
I love that every single myth we have also has a sidecar of don't believe what you see on social media.
Right, right.
So let's take another one. And this is something I hear all the time from baby coaches, our students at Journey, and really any helping professional is that your own life has to be in order before you can
Right.
be a coach or be a good coach.
Yeah, and I could see where this comes from because when you look at like business coaching, you have to have some kind of resume, right? You have to have built something or sold something or proven yourself in some way. Or if you look at like fitness coaching, you have to have you know uh, done something in fitness, and maybe you have to. I mean, you don't have to look a certain way, but you definitely have to practice what you preach. But with life coaching, relationship coaching, and the coaching that we're talking about, wellness coaching, it's completely a different animal.
It is, and I even, I agree with you on fitness coaching, but I want to challenge a little bit on business coaching. So my experience when I first became certified as a coach, I was 29 years old. I
Hmm.
had no experience in business whatsoever, and I was very skilled as an executive coach, and I was working with executives who were almost twice my age,
Right.
and because I was really, really good at the Socratic strategic line of questioning, I was a very effective business coach with zero experience.
Yeah, I wonder how much. the society's view on what coaching looks like has impacted me for me to think that I've never had a business coach, but for me to have that definition.
Probably quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, one of the big myths about coaching is what it actually is. And the work of a coach is facilitation, where coaches facilitate discovery and change processes for individuals, groups, organizations, communities, and even nations. And so
Hmm.
when we're really narrowing it down to being a facilitator, it's a job, just like any other job, and you need to develop technique, expertise in order to perform well. And your own life can be a dumpster fire, as everyone's life is from time to time. And that doesn't take away your professional skill set.
Yeah, I remember. I remind people in our class that I started at my lowest. I started helping people when I was going through a divorce and had really nothing. It was just rebuilding my life. So
Yeah. And just as a side note, everybody has bad days. And one of the things that I love so much about the field of coaching is the ICF Code of Ethics, because it has so many wonderful points. But here it stipulates that if you're having a sick day, if you're having a bad day, if your life is too intense that you feel that you can't show up and perform, the standard is to call out sick, reschedule with your clients. Don't
mm,
force yourself to work if you feel like you're not really able to pull through.
right. Here's number 5, and this is a this is kind of a fun one. That coaches are actually wannabe counselors or wannabe therapists or wannabe mental health providers.
Yeah, I get this all the time. And so both you and I are clinically trained.
Yeah.
What's been your experience?
Well, I think where this comes from is a lot of therapists or people in the clinical world who have spent a lot of money, a lot of time in classrooms, like myself, and getting a lot of hours, specifically around 3,000. And so after they've gone on that journey, there's going to be naturally, some animosity or anger toward coaches who can start practicing at a much shorter time. Right, they don't have to do all of that stuff.
Yeah. So, having the helping professional bug is a wonderful thing to have. When you want to help people and you're looking for the right way to do it, I think it's important to really understand the differences between all of the different disciplines. One of the best things that ever happened to me was I happened to have gone through coach training. I was certified as an executive coach, and I had also done extensive work studying applied positive psychology before I got into my clinical studies. And so my
Mhm.
entire lens was informed by the potential of the strengths based approach. And I kept really just being more and more and more interested in post acute care. Well, what happens afterwards? Well, what happens when you want to go on and live the rest of your life? Well, what about flourishing? And the medical model just didn't hold those answers for me. And so for me, I realized that I actually prefer to live and work on the sunny side of life, and that I wanted to work in the post acute care space. I wanted to work in the space where people were not experiencing psychological anguish. And so for me, looking at the medical model, understanding what it is, understanding how hard it is, and understanding, what highly trained counselors, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists do every day, and then looking at coaching, I was just like, oh hell no, I want to be a coach.
Yeah,
Like,
I could relate to that, absolutely. And kind of a same version for me, when I started out, as a therapist working in treatment centers, shirt tucked in, lots of strict rules, lots of paperwork, underpaid. And I was like, I can't do this forever. I felt very kind of trapped and suffocated. I wasn't able to be creative. And then when I put on my coaching ad and I started to, meet people in coffee shops and do all the things that coaches do today, that felt right to me. That felt sustainable. That felt like I wasn't even working.
Yeah, I agree. And as you're listening and if you're thinking about trying to decide between all of these different disciplines, that's where learning comes in. So I encourage everyone to move towards the theoretical underpinnings that light your brain on fire. So for me, I can't get enough of applied positive psychology. It led me to study neurobiology, which is something I never thought I would do in a million bajillion years, is get
Mm,
interested in brains.
mhm.
And, at the same time, my colleagues that I went to graduate school with are really happy in their work as doctored therapists, and they love what they do. And thank God for them because they help so many people on a regular basis. And so do I, but in a
Yeah.
very different way with a very specific and different toolbox.
Yeah, and I wanna say to any therapist listening, um, if you decide to be a coach, it doesn't make you less of a therapist. I mean, and all the stuff that you learned in the clinical world isn't wasted. You're just adding on to it. So, although they are different, don't want you to think that you have wasted your time going to therapy school or doing the hours because all of that is just going to make you a stronger helper in general.
Absolutely. And you can diversify your practice. You can work in different ways. You can take a break from therapy sometimes. And
Right.
diversifying your skill set is also a wonderful way to avoid burnout, no matter what you do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, number six. This is probably the biggest one that I hear. Coaches give advice. That's what we do. Not true.
Yeah. Not true. Not at all.
Yeah.
So, as we've been talking about, coaching is a skill set. It's empirically based. It's evidence based. There's a lot of technique that goes into it. You need to know what you're doing, and that assumption that coaches give advice, I can understand because many professions do. If you
Yeah, of course.
hire an attorney, they give you advice. If you hire a
Right.
financial advisor, they give you advice. Um, and in life, free advice is everywhere. It's usually shitty, but you can certainly
Hmm.
get it from anyone on the street corner. Um, so, a definition of coaching that I really like comes from David Rock, and he does brain-based coaching, which I guess is what I do with neurobiology, and he says coaches help people think better.
Mm. Oh, I like that. Simple.
It's simple. And so, why is that a valuable facilitation process? Is to help you think better. And when we really break it down, what we're doing is you're providing a customized conversation for your client that's going to help that person strategize and create a plan to get what they want by thinking and acting more resourcefully.
Also, if you think coaching means giving people advice, um, man, the pressure that you're going to put on yourself because what if that advice is not good? What if it doesn't work? You know?
Well, I think that's something that we need to explore with this topic because sometimes the client does need consulting.
Sure.
So, if you find that that is true, that your client literally does need, professional expertise in a given area, if you're qualified to consult, do it, but create a separate contract for it and don't call it coaching because your client won't know what they're buying and you can get into trouble for fraud and false advertising.
Yeah, and also, there are times where I disclose parts of my story. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about coaching is you could be a little more transparent. And also just me being active on social media. I feel like a lot of people who find me know everything about me, but there is power in me sharing my story, but that's very different than giving advice.
Very much so. And so
Yeah.
let's qualify that. So if you choose to self-identify or share in a session, the standard, and this is why training is important, is the standard is that in session you check in with yourself in real time. Am I doing this for self-validation or am I doing this to enhance the session?
Right.
And that's the standard. So an example, I coach often on divorce recovery. I'm divorced, you're divorced, and a lot of times when folks are going through that for the very first couple months, they really feel like they're dying and that their life is over. And I can relate. I remember,
Right,
what
right.
that felt like. And so I might say something like, hey, I'm proof that there's life on the other side.
Unlike Noelle, I do it strictly for self-validation and ego.
Well, so this is why this is why we have me around. Don't do
Right.
what John said. You apply the standard correctly. And something that I see happening more and more that I really want to raise a red flag for our listeners is, don't call yourself a coach in order to negate the fact that you don't have the credentials to do something else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like
Yeah.
coach by default, you're saying.
Yeah. So if you're not a counselor, a psychotherapist, a financial advisor, or a lawyer, don't call yourself a coach because you want to play in those
Right, right,
disciplines.
right.
It's super unethical to do that under the heading of coach. And because coaches don't advise when you call your service one thing when it's really something else, that's false advertising, and all of the specializations that I just listed are regulated. And so you
Yeah.
could get into some serious trouble with that.
Guys, the ante to be at the table is a certification. And if
Mhm.
you are listening to this and you're interested in being a coach, and you can relate to some of these myths, maybe you have them yourself or you're struggling with them, give us a call at Journey and we'll go deeper with you, and we could explore if coaching is for you.
Absolutely. And just, I want to shout out, because I love it so much, the ICF Code of Ethics. Give it a Google if you really want to understand what coaching is and the ethical practices that bind it. That's one of the things that we really heavily cover in our own intensive. Check out the International Coaching Federation Code of Ethics. Give it a read. If you like what that document has to say, you're probably going to like being a coach.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Be well.
Have a great one.
Mhm. Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to journey.co/everything to explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a strong community to do it in. We created Journey Coaching to equip you with the tools, training, and community you need to attain your goals.
Join JRNI Coaching and begin your journey towards personal freedom and a transformative state of growth today. That's JRNI.co/everything.